Was up in Garrett County. He likes the Steelers probably, so push some Ravens in front of him.
No, I'm not a Steeler fan. I'm not a Pirate fan. I'm not a Penguin fan.
Oh, good. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
You do need to work on that. I'm just glad to be here, phrase. It didn't sound too convincing.
Yeah, I know. My heart wasn't really in it. Hopefully about 3:30 you can check with me and I'll be able to say I'm really glad I'm on the way home, but we'll see.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say that I stayed down here so I could make sure that I was at this meeting on time to hear all the good things that you're going to share with us. Unlike some of my other colleagues who actually went home, but a lot of that had to do with they were being called back for their medicine and their nap time.
No, Syllabirdie's online.
I've been here.
That's the dean. He is considered the Pope of the Maryland General Assembly.
Hey, I'm all about the naps. The older I get, the more I'm turning into my father.
That means
Did you
that
enjoy
means
your
you're-
walk?
I
That
think there's a
means-
commercial about that, right?
No, that means he's deemed to join the ranks of the Senate.
Mr. Chairman, did you enjoy your walk?
I did. I appreciate you not running me over, although I did notice your car veering that way.
I offered you a ride and you refused, just for the record.
Well,
I'm here listening.
I've seen all the dings all over that car and suspect that the ride would be like a roller coaster.
Are you sure it was his car? I understand he has borrowed cars in the past.
Oh, my.
He puts the original jack into carjacking.
Very clever, very clever.
Well, at least when he can find his keys.
Find us what?
Your keys.
Oh, we've had that discussion.
Good morning, Ms. White.
Good morning. How are you?
Awesome and wonderful.
Oh,
We're just working on making sure every email that is sent here gets a response.
okay.
Just remind us from our original days.
Yes, indeedy. Yes, indeedy. And save every business card that flies by.
That's exactly correct.
Yes, indeed.
Regardless if they put it out or not.
Yes, yes.
You found that in the house on the floor? Yes, just pick it up.
Yeah, pick it up. Pick it up. Record it. Put it in the data system. Oh my goodness.
Senator,
Folks, I'm here to for April Rose. She's talking with her county officials about something. She's on a meeting with them. So I'm sitting in for her.
Senator McKay,
Yes, the extinguished. No, I'm sorry, extinguished. Senator. Yes, sir.
Oh, that was bad. That was really bad.
no, I can't say what I'm thinking because we're on the air.
I know what you're thinking.
I'm just curious. Are you planning to climb Mount Everest the way you're dressed?
I actually am, sir. We are headed back to Garrett County. Yes, sir.
I see. Yeah, you're dressed like it must be minus 20 out there. Or are you just fragile?
I am a lot of things. Fragile is not one of those things, but fair enough.
I'd say you two are even now, I think.
We're still waiting on DLS to join us. So we only have 2 items on the agenda. So hopefully they join us.
Get this meeting started, please. Did you alert them to the meeting? Did you alert them to the meeting?
I'm just gonna.
Okay. Dismissed. Ah, mamma mia.
All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. We'll just move the PSC letter first on the agenda, and hopefully DLS joins us. They were fully aware of the meeting and we confirmed it with them yesterday, so I'm not sure what happened, but let's go ahead and start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of
and to the
America,
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the prayer will be offered this morning by Senator McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heavenly Father, we come for you today seeking your wisdom, guidance as we gather for this meeting. Grant us the clarity of mind, humility of heart, and the spirit of cooperation as we discuss the matters affecting our community. Bless each one here for discernment, patience, and willingness to listen. Keeping in your name, I most humbly pray. Amen.
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 Thanks, Senator.
Well done.
So we only had two items on the agenda. The first was to be the DLS briefing, state aid to local governments. Again, we'll wait. Hopefully she'll be able to join us. So let's go ahead and move to the second item on the agenda, and that was the PSC board member discussion. Delegate Pippi pointed out to me that there is a vacancy on the PSC, and there hasn't been someone from Western Maryland, I believe since 1992, appointed by Governor William Donald Schaefer. And the statute does read that the commission shall be broadly representative of the geographic and demographic diversity of the state and the public. So the letter that we sent you in draft form simply asks the governor to consider appointing someone from Western Maryland in the spirit of the law. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to read the draft, and I'll open it up to Delegate Pippi and anyone else who may have some comments. Delegate Pippi?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. So obviously, I guess I'll just give some background. In Frederick and Carroll, we've been dealing with some issues related to transmission lines and other things. And we find that a lot of this authority rests with the Public Service Commission, which is a very influential board that's made up of 5 members. The law as written says that those members should broadly represent geographical and demographical, I guess, areas of our state, but it really doesn't define what that means. And matter of fact, there's 4 members now. There is a vacancy, and I believe 2 of the members are from like either Baltimore or Baltimore City. One is from Anne Arundel, and one is from Montgomery County. I think that's correct. But there's no representation in Western Maryland, and we could really use a voice on that commission. Some of you remember there was a delegate turned commissioner from Calvert County who was last on the board. He has retired. He was a previous minority leader. But in any event, within the law, we thought it was appropriate to ask the governor to appoint somebody from Western Maryland. We think that's very appropriate, especially since the law dictates that there should be geographical representation on that commission. And it would be great timing because we have huge projects in Western Maryland that the Public Service Commission is going to be considering. So with that, I support the idea. I think it would be a great letter to send to the governor from the Western Maryland delegation, and hopefully my colleagues here will support it.
Thank you, Delegate. You know, we also have the issue with AES Warrior Run closing in Allegheny County. So I would add generation at the first sentence of the last paragraph, as well as the transmission issue that's been raised. So anyone else have any comments on the matter?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator.
To support Delegate Pippi, I think it's paramount, just for the simple fact that what has happened, they have actually checked the box. One of the members years ago happened to come from the board of Verizon, and I was told that they checked the box for geographical representation because that person lived in, I believe, Montgomery County, but because he worked for a company that serviced Western Maryland, they thought that that was a checking of the box, which is absurd and actually counterproductive of making sure that everybody is at the table, as the governor has stated, to make sure that all voices are heard. So good job. I think this is a well-needed and well-purposed letter, and I move to send the letter.
So, Senator, having said that, the letter says from Western Maryland. Should it say resides in Western Maryland to address that issue you just raised?
I think that would be a great idea, and in the backstory, we can all talk about what has been done in the past, and Governor Schaefer did not do that. So, yes, sir.
All right. So you did make a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Delegate Pippi. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, vote by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed to the letter? None opposed. Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate it. We'll do the final markups to that and get the letter out today. We do have DLS on board now, and they're going to provide us with the state aid briefing in regards to the impact of proposed reductions in funding on our various Western Maryland counties. So I believe Ms. Monroe, is that you?
Hello, good morning. We do want to apologize for joining the meeting late. So I'm going to hand it right over to Hiram, who's going to do our presentation today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And Valerie, would you be able to put the presentation on screen?
Yeah, can you please give me share screen access? Thank you.
And we have copies of our reports that we'll be distributing to your office later today. I think you have virtual copies, but we will be providing you with hard copies of our materials. So as soon as the report gets put on the screen, I can go.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for share screen access.
But while we wait, I do want to indicate that the amount of state aid that I will be presenting to you in this report already reflects the reductions that the governor has proposed in both the BRFA and in his education funding bill. So the funding has already been accounted for. So if you turn to page 4 of the report, it kind of breaks down state aid to local governments for each jurisdiction. So you can see that funding for Allegheny County will be around $163 million. Funding for Carroll County will be around $254 million. Frederick County receives around $500 million. Garrett County, $48 million. And Washington around $327 million. The vast majority of state aid is provided to public school systems, and it incorporates a local wealth measure. So you see there's a wide variety of funding when you put it on a per capita basis. State aid for Western Maryland jurisdictions ranges from around $1,400 per capita in Carroll County, which is number 18, to over $2,400 in Allegheny County, which is ranked number 6. If we turn to page 7, it kind of breaks down the amount of funding that is provided to jurisdictions by unit of local government. As you can see, statewide, around $11.4 billion will be provided to local governments. Most of this funding goes to the public school system. And that is also the case for Western Maryland jurisdictions. You can see that funding for public schools accounts for the vast majority of the funding provided to local governments. Funding for county and municipal governments are primarily provided for local highway user revenues, for police and fire aid, and for disparity grant funding for some of the least affluent jurisdictions. So we're going to start off with talking about some of the funding that's provided to the county and municipal governments. If we go to page 23 of the report, one of the main programs that county and municipal governments receive is police aid. And there you can see funding for the various different jurisdictions in Western Maryland. The vast majority of funding under this program is based on population density, in which more urban jurisdictions with a higher population density receives a higher per capita funding amount. However, jurisdictions with a larger share of municipalities also benefit from the program because there is a around $1,950 grant per municipal sworn officer. And jurisdictions in Western Maryland tends to benefit from this component of the program because there tends to be more municipalities in Western Maryland. In addition, if you turn to page 24, it shows funding under the Police Aid Enhancement Program. This is the 4th year that this additional funding is made available to local governments. The funding is based on violent crime offenses. So this is one state aid program where you really don't want to receive a lot of the funding. And actually, Garrett County receives the least amount of funding under the program at $1.44, which is probably a very good thing because that means that there's very few or less violent crime in the jurisdiction. But funding for this program varies from less than $2 in Garrett County to almost $6 in Washington County. If we turn to page 28, you will see that another program that benefits Western Maryland is the Fire and Rescue Aid. And here, funding is based on property tax accounts, and funding in FY26 was increased statewide from $15 million to $16.5 million. There is a minimum funding level under this program where each jurisdiction receives at least 2% of the funding, which is $330,000. And that minimum funding level does benefit Garrett County. Based on property tax accounts, only 1.3% are allocated in Garrett County, but they are guaranteed at least 2% of the funding. So that is something important under this program. That minimum funding level is important for Garrett County. Page 29 shows the allocation of local health grants, and you can see funding varies by jurisdiction. This year, funding under this program increases by 5.2%, and most of the increases were in the less urban jurisdictions because the funding increases this year went to pay for salary increases for state employees who work at the local health departments. And in Western Maryland, a large portion of the local health department employees are state employees. So funding increases under this program will range from 5.9% in Washington County to over 8.8% in Garrett County. If you turn to page 30, it kind of gives you a summary on the local highway user revenue program. And before we go into the allocations that are provided to the county and municipal governments, I do want to highlight that currently funding in both FY26 and FY27, the local share is based on 20% of the revenues in the gasoline motor vehicle revenue account. That's a component of the Transportation Trust Fund. Under state law, beginning in FY28, the local share will only be 15.6%. So beginning in FY28, there will be a reduction in the amount of local highway user revenues that will be provided to local governments. So that is something to look into. It's not going to happen this year or next year, but beginning in FY28 under current law, funding under this program will be reduced. If you turn to page 33, it kind of allocates the funding based on to the county and municipal governments. And you can see that for most jurisdictions in Western Maryland, the municipalities receive a larger share of the funding than the county government. This is based on road mileage and vehicle registration, but also based on the formula that gives extra funding to the municipalities. Okay, if we turn to page 34, it shows funding under the Disparity Grant Program. This program provides additional state funding to some of the low wealth jurisdictions that receives below average funding through their local income tax. The goal of the program is to provide funding so jurisdictions receive at least 75% of the state average. 3 jurisdictions in Western Maryland receives funding under this program. It's Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington counties, as you see on page 36. On page 36. Okay. You can see that for okay. Funding for Garrett County, if you turn to page 38, is actually decreasing this year. And the reason why the funding for Garrett County is decreasing is that the disparities in income tax collections has lowered in recent years. And that is shown on page 39. You can see here, the program is based on net taxable income receipts. And as you can see, compared to FY25 funding and FY26 funding, the per capita tax yield in Garrett County is actually the 4th highest increase in the state. And that is due to the fact that funding in FY26 is based on the income tax collections received in tax year 2023. So what has happened is that funding for some of the jurisdictions for tax year 2023, the revenues coming in from some of the more affluent jurisdictions has been more constrained in relation to the income tax receipts from the more less affluent jurisdictions. And that has to do with some of the capital gains that some of the wealthier jurisdictions received in prior years. Those revenues are not there in tax year 2023. Another factor, if we turn to back to page 36, is that funding under this program is based on local tax effort. As you can see that in the program in 2009 was capped at the FY 2010 funding level. As you can see that the FY 2010 funding level was at $121 million. At that point, Washington County did not qualify as a disparity grant county. So due to the cap provision, Washington County would never be eligible for funding under this program. But subsequently, if we go back to page 34, in 2013, the General Assembly amended the cap provision to put in what we call a minimum funding level. Each jurisdiction's funding under the disparity grant program, they are guaranteed to receive a minimum funding amount based on their local tax effort. Jurisdictions that impose at least a 2.8% local income tax rate receives 20%. If they have at least a 3% tax rate, they receive 40%. And now if they impose the maximum 3.2% income tax rate, they receive 75%. If we go back to page 36, under the program, Washington County's formula amount is $12.5 million. Currently, they impose a 2.95% local income tax rate. Due to that rate, they are only guaranteed 20% of their funding under the program, which is $2.5 million. In tax year 2021, Washington County had a 3.2% local income tax rate. So at some point, Washington County had the maximum 3.2 local income tax rate. They have reduced it to 2.95. That has resulted in the county losing $6.9 million in funding under this program. So you can see that several of the disparity grant counties has imposed the maximum 3.2%, primarily on the Eastern Shore. You're looking at Caroline, Dorchester, and Somerset. These are also very low wealth jurisdictions, but they imposed the 3.2 local income tax rate to maximize funding under this program. Washington County kind of went in the other way. They have reduced their local income tax revenues, and unfortunately, that does result in them losing a considerable amount of state aid, around $7 million a year. Okay, and then we've moved to page 40. The one last piece under county municipal governments is gaining impact aid grants. And here you see that Allegheny County gets around $3.1 million. We're going to shift our focus real quickly to focus on education aid. If we turn to page 41, it shows you total state aid to public schools. And here, around 77% of state aid to local governments in Western Maryland goes to public schools. And the 5 local school systems in Western Maryland would get around $1 billion in direct funding. And this is around a $38 million increase from the prior year. So if you look on page 41, support for local school systems in Western Maryland, it ranges from around $8,500 per pupil in Carroll County to around $9,500 per pupil in Garrett and Frederick. Washington County gets around $13,000 per pupil, and Allegheny is ranked 4th and gets around $16,000. As we stated earlier, the vast majority of this funding is based on local wealth and student enrollment. If we turn to page 42, it kind of breaks down funding on a per pupil basis for direct aid. This is what goes to the local school system. It also shows you the funding for per pupil retirement. And this is the funding that the state makes on behalf of the local school system, and it goes directly to the state retirement system without going through the local school system. Page 45 breaks down one of the largest components of funding, under state education aid, and it's to our foundation program. This is the regular funding formula that provides funding for regular programs. It doesn't take into account the special student populations. And here you can see that Allegheny County ranks first in the state with funding at around $7,200. Garrett County has the fourth lowest amount at around $2,700. And we're going to discuss that later on why Garrett County receives less funding. If we turn to page 46, it shows you funding under the Blueprint initiatives. And one of the two major components of the Blueprint is the concentration of poverty and full-day pre-kindergarten. So funding under concentration of poverty is being targeted to school systems that not only has students who are identified as being low income, but also a concentration of these students. You can see that under the per pupil funding for the program, it ranges from Allegheny and Washington County receives a considerable amount of support under this program. Funding for Carroll and Frederick, they receive minimal funding under the program. You can see on a per pupil basis, Allegheny County, when all of these funds are added up, they get around $1,500 per pupil above the state average. Garrett County is around $1,000 per pupil, and Washington County is around $1,200. But funding for Frederick and Carroll is around $250 per pupil in Carroll. And for Frederick, it's around $400. And that has to do with the low concentration of poverty in those two jurisdictions. Page 47 kind of shows you the state funding that's targeted to the three targeted student populations. Compensatory aid funding is based on the free and reduced price meal count. This program is targeting additional resources to low-income students. We also provide additional resources for English language learners. And that is one program that, like Allegheny and Garrett, they have very few English language learners in those jurisdictions. So funding is very limited to those jurisdictions. And there's also additional resources provided to special education students. When all of these funds are brought together, Allegheny County ranks fifth at over $5,000 per pupil. Washington County is ranked 8th at around $4,000, but Garrett, Carroll, and Frederick receives funding below the state average. If we turn to page 48, it kind of shows you the different factors that are affecting targeted education funding. One is your targeted student index. These are the per share of students in those three student categories, and local wealth per pupil. And so now we're going to go and talk about local wealth per pupil on page 50. As we stated, this is the two main components that drives funding for local school system is student enrollment, your targeted student populations, and those are the students who receive free and reduced price meals, English language learners, and special education. And the other category is wealth per pupil. And here you see that Garrett County is ranked 4th. So it means that on a per pupil basis, Garrett County is the 4th wealthiest jurisdiction. Now, we have just stated previously that Garrett County is also a disparity grant county, which receives additional state aid due to their low income tax collections. So how can Garrett County be both an affluent jurisdictions for purposes of state education aid and also be a low wealth county for the disparity grant program? And if you turn to page 53, it kind of explains what's happening here. Local wealth is measured by both your local property and local income. So those are the two main components that we look at when we are looking at local wealth. And as you can see for Garrett County, they have the 4th highest on a per pupil basis, a 4th highest amount of local property wealth. And as you probably know, the vast majority of that probably is due to the property around Deep Creek Lake. When you look at their local income, they are below the state average. So, and another factor that's affecting this is that when you look at the local wealth calculation, around 78% of the wealth that's used for Garrett County is based on their property. So it's the property wealth that is really driving the factor of why Garrett County is considered the fourth wealthiest jurisdiction for state aid purposes. So now we're going to shift our focus briefly to student enrollment. There's just basically 4 pages we want to focus on. One is 56 that deals with student enrollment. And here you can see statewide student enrollment decreases by 0.1%. However, 3 local school systems in Western Maryland are posting gains in student enrollment. That's Washington, Frederick, and Carroll. Garrett and Allegheny are posting declines. On page 57, it shows that 3 local school systems have over 55% of their students approved for free and reduced price meals. And those are Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington County. You can see that Carroll has the lowest share of students receiving free and reduced price meals, and Frederick County has the 4th lowest. And that's the main reason why those 2 jurisdictions receive less funding under our targeted student enrollments programs. But what's interesting is over half the students in Maryland are approved for free and reduced price meals. And these are students that have been targeted to receive extra educational resources because they need extra assistance in order to meet the academic goals of the state. So that's kind of interesting that we have that type of situation. Page 58, it kind of shows you the students that are identified as English language learners. And as you can see that Western Maryland has relatively few students identified as English language learners. But on page 59, it shows you students who receive special education services. And there you can see that Allegheny County leads the state in funding, leads the state in the number of students that receive special education services. The other 4 school systems are below the state average. So now we're going to move back to page 11 and talk briefly about the proposed reductions in local funding that is in both the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act and also in the Governor's Administration Bill, Senate Bill 429, and the House Crossfile. All of the funding that we have presented to you in this report already takes into account these proposed reductions. So you can see on page 11, state aid is being proposed to be reduced from current law funding amounts by $262.5 million. This is not a reduction in the amount they received in the prior year. This is the reduction in what they're supposed to get under current law. Of the $262.5 million, the vast majority of it is for public schools. And there, half of that is from collaborative learning. This is going to be a reduction in state aid in order to implement collaborative learning. But under the governor's plan, this whole collaborative learning proposal is being paused for several years. So while the state aid is not going to be provided to the local school systems really don't have to implement collaborative learning. So the reduction in funding should also be a corresponding reduction in what the local school systems have to spend. But that is not the case for non-public placements. That $25 million reduction there will have to be picked up by the local school system. That is actually what we are calling a state-local cost shift. Those costs will be incurred in FY26, but the local school system will have to pick them up, not the state.
Just to clarify real quickly, sorry to interrupt. You had indicated that these reductions are already reflected in all the numbers in the other charts?
Except for the cost shifts, because the non-public placements is not actually, this is actually going to be a new cost to the local school system. So I'm going to go into, there's a couple of cost shifts that we see there under state local cost shifts that the local governments are going to have to pick up. They're not part of the state aid programs. These are new costs. And so let's just move to that page, Arnold, page 12. Of these reductions that we're showing here, the total fiscal impact of those, 143 million will be new cost that the local governments have to pick up. And if you turn to page 14, it kind of gives you a better sense of what's happening here. So of the $143 million of state costs that are being shifted to the local governments now, and these are currently outside of the state aid programs. Teachers' retirement and community college retirement. These were costs that the state was covering. Now they have put into the BRFA that will be now county government costs. So even though these are for teacher retirement and for community college retirement, it's not the school system or the community college that will have to cover them. It's the county government. So you can see that for Allegheny County, that's around $750,000 that the county government will have to pay the retirement agency. In Garrett County, it's around $268,000. And in Washington County, it's around $2.5 million. In addition, the non-public placement costs. These will be additional costs that the local school system has to pay. Now, the one thing you need to notice, as we stated earlier, state funding for local school systems are increasing pretty significant. So most of these additional costs that you're seeing here for local school systems, they can probably cover it through their increase in their state aid this year. That's not to say that's not true for the cost for the county governments. As you see, costs for the county governments, for example, funding for the county and municipal governments, as you see on page 9, is only increasing for Allegheny County by $182,000. It's actually decreasing for Allegheny County. It's only increasing for Garrett County by $131,000. For Washington County, they're getting $732,000 more. So funding these cost shifts are going to have a much bigger impact on county governments. Now, we're going to talk to you in a minute on what could help mitigate these costs. But there's one more cost shift we need to talk about, and those are property assessments. If we go back to page 14, under current law, property assessment costs are shared 50-50 by the state and local governments. And the rationale for that is that the State Department of Assessments and Taxation conducts all of the assessments for local governments. Is done centralized, so all of the assessments statewide are being done consistently. Local governments tend to benefit the most from this approach because around 90% of property tax revenues are local revenues. The state imposes a state property tax to cover debt service payments, but it's only around $1 billion. Well, it's $1 billion, but it's only 10% of total property tax collections. So I think the rationale is that under the plan is that the local governments benefit most from this centralized approach. The cost should be shared. So under current law, the costs are split 50-50. The governor is proposing the local governments to cover 90% of the cost. And as you can see, that has a big impact. For Allegheny County, it's another $370,000 they will have to pay to SSTAT. Carroll County, it's $600,000. Garrett County, $261,000. Frederick, nearly $800,000. And in Washington County, it's over $500,000. So this is a lot of money, additional money, that the county governments are going to have to pay the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. But if we do turn to page 16, when it comes time to how can we afford, what is the revenue picture for local governments? And as you can see here, property assessments are remaining fairly strong over the last 3 years. If you look at groups 2, starting in 2023, it's on average around a 20% increase in property assessments over a 3-year period. And then the following group is you still have these strong assessments. So basically the entire state has been reassessed in the last 3 years, and assessments have gone up dramatically, at least around 20% over a 3-year period. So this should result in fairly strong property tax revenue collections for local governments. And we do have that in another report that we can share with you that's showing for most jurisdictions in Western Maryland, they are experiencing fairly strong increases in their property tax revenues in the last 2 years. Revenue collections for Allegheny County are expecting to go up by 2.4% a year. Garrett County is realizing fairly strong growth at around 10%. So some of these costs that are being shifted to county governments, the county governments should be receiving significant increases in their property tax collections, at least in the near term. So I know this is a lot of information. We are more than willing to walk you through any of these charts more extensively at a time that you want to meet with us and share some of our other reports with you. We do have another report that I think Valerie is going to show you, deals with county revenue outlooks. That provides you with a snapshot of the revenue picture for FY25. That's the year that the county governments are currently working in. This state aid report is a snapshot of what's to come in FY26 under the governor's proposals. And so that concludes our presentation. And we can just open it up for questions. And I know that was kind of a high level presentation. If you do have questions or you want us to meet with you like one-on-one, we are willing to meet with you or your staff.
Mr. Chairman.
I think Delegate Ciliberti has a question.
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you very much for this. How accurate do you think these data are?
The numbers in the state aid report,
Yes.
most of these numbers are formula driven, so they're to the dollar, so they're very accurate. So most of our state aid is based on enrollment, and it's based on our local wealth figures. So those are fairly much set in statute. So there's not much. Most of the state aid is formula based, and most of the components are based on prior year data that we actually have. So there's not much changing from these numbers.
And if I may, what unit within the state government has compiled these figures?
For education aid, most of the state funding is based on education. Right. And you basically got 3 units. You have the Maryland State Department of Education. They compile their funding estimates. The Department of Budget and Management also runs the simulation models. And DLS, we also here run our simulation models to make sure that everyone is being consistent. So you got 3 agencies basically running these models to make sure that the numbers are accurate.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the appraisal and reassessment system? Because I know in Washington County, I think we're seeing an average of like 30% increase in assessments. And I know some properties have gone anywhere from that up to an excess of 100% increase. Can you talk about how properties are reassessed?
I can just give you a very general approach. So the assessments are done by the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. They have an assessment team basically for each county. So basically what happens is that the properties are reassessed every 3 years. So a county is divided into 3 groups. As you see, there's group 2, group 3, and group 1. So basically 1/3 of properties within a county are assessed in any given year. So over a 3-year period, all of the properties get a reassessment. So properties are reassessed once every 3 years. The county is divided into 3 groups. And so it takes 3 years for all of the properties to be reassessed. So you can see that, like for Washington County.
I was more interested in the process itself. Is it still a mass appraisal system being used, or are they coming out looking at each property, or how do they develop a revised assessment, say, for
Right.
someone's
I'll
house?
have to get back with you on that, but I do know they are no longer required to go out to each home for a personal assessment. So I think it's probably more mass assessments. It's so they do not have to go out to do a one-on-one assessment. They look at sales data. They look at so look, I'll get back with you on that.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Weibel. A quick question. You pointed out, it was pointed out that assessments are going up dramatically and that therefore that's going to generate more tax revenue, which is obviously true. But won't that be mitigated somewhat by the Homestead Act that?
Correct. Most jurisdictions can set their homestead caps at between 0 to 10%, and many have rates at 5%. I don't. We can show you one of our reports that shows the rate for each jurisdiction in Western Maryland. So that should mitigate some of the increases, but you still should be getting a 5% assessment. Let's say that your cap is set at 5%. Your assessments will be going up by 5% each year. So eventually, if, for example, if you look at Allegheny County's 31% increase, they may not be able to get, if they have an assessment cap at 5%, they won't get the 31% all in the first year, but your assessments will go up by 5% each year. And that is only on owner-occupied property. If you're looking at commercial businesses, like for Garrett County, if a large percentage of the properties are second homes, the homestead cap does not apply to those properties. They will face the increase phased in at the full rate over a 3-year period. So your homestead only benefits owner-occupied. It doesn't apply to commercial, and it also doesn't apply to vacation homes or second homes or rental units.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
One other question, if I could. When will we be able to get copies of your presentation and these charts?
Yes, we have copies available. We can drop them off today. We'll have a copy of our overview of state aid to local governments, and we will also provide you with our county revenue outlook report that kind of goes over the entire county budgets and it shows you the revenues for the current fiscal year. And we will also provide you with a 2-page chart that shows you state aid program by program over the last 2 years.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, and we'll have those dropped off for you this afternoon, actually after this presentation.
Thank you.
So we did distribute them via email, but what you have for us, is that a bound book, more of a?
It will be a hard copy report, and
Okay.
I think it'll probably be easier because it's some of the charts, like in our county revenue outlook, we provide a lot of maps and charts, and it will be in color for you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, if there's no other questions, I could turn it over to Valerie, who can kind of show you and the other individuals how to access our reports online.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiram. Thank you again.
Okay.
Ms. Monroe, anything to follow up?
Yes, so I'm going to just show you briefly how you can access some of our fiscal reports on our website. So starting with the Maryland General Assembly webpage, you select the Legislative Services tab on the right, and this will take you to the Department of Legislative Services website. So to access the state aid reports, you select the Budget tab here, and then you select the State Aid to Local Government. And this page provides a lot of state aid resources. I want to just highlight the 2-year charts, which Hiram just mentioned. And this chart provides information by program and by area for fiscal 25 and fiscal 26. And we have this information provided on a statewide basis and also by jurisdiction. So for the Western Maryland, you can actually zone in on your specific jurisdiction, and it will provide the information for you by program and by area. Also on the session reports, you will see the state aid overview report here, and that's a report from which Hiram presented on. You can access that report on our website here. I also want to highlight the state aid data downloads, and this allows users to download our state aid information in an Excel format, and this information goes all the way back to 2011. I just want to also emphasize that the state aid information currently on our website reflects the budget as introduced, and this information will be updated to show the legislative appropriation. I just want to quickly draw your attention to some other local government reports that we have on our website, and it's located under the policy areas. So if you select policy areas tab, and then you select the intergovernmental tab. So on this page, there is a wealth of information based on the fiscal reports that we prepare. So under the annual reports, Hiram mentioned the County Revenue Outlook Report, which provides a fiscal outlook of the county, of the fiscal state of the county for fiscal 23 to fiscal 25. So here you can find that report, and the most recent one we completed was for 2025. And I also want to highlight another very important report, that's a local government overview report. And here you can find a lot of valuable information on local government finances, local tax rates, local revenue growth, and we also have public school funding by federal, states, and local. Again, we just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to present. And if you have any questions concerning our reports, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
After we get out of here.
All right, well, thank you for that. So we can get everything online pretty much. Anyone else have any questions? Not seeing any. We do also allow for public comment during the meeting. Does anyone from the public have any comments or questions? Just state your name for the record if you would. I do not see any. So you guys are getting off easy today.
Okay.
So again, we appreciate your time and effort. I know it's a lot of data to digest and to put together. So we'll look it over, and if anyone has any questions, the members can get back to you individually. So that is there a motion for adjournment? Motion by Delegate Boucher. Is there a second?
I can motion second it. Nobody's left.
Second by Baker. He's here. So, all right. Thank you all.